An interview with Michael Sean Comerford.
How would you like to spend 1 year working as a carny, traveling all across the U.S.? If you've ever thought about it, this next guest has actually done it. Michael Sean Comerford is a fellow Marquette alum. That's one of the reasons we had him on the program, but also a fascinating tale with what he did with 1 year of his life. Michael, welcome to the program here in St. Louis. How are you?
All right, Mark. Thanks so much.
So how about this idea that you just kind of packed up and said, you know what, I wouldn't mind being a carny. I'm going to go from town to town and work at the local carnivals. Where did this concept come from?
Well, it came to mind originally when I was a young man because I saw a carnival and I worked in it for a weekend and I saw these people and they seemed like interesting secrets going town to town. And I thought, well, this would be interesting to write about. And I was changing professions from a newspaper man to, I thought I want to be a book writer someday. So I thought, well, I'll write a book about my year in carnivals, and I went to 10 of them. Would you like to know where I went?
Well, yeah, absolutely. How does it start? I mean, do you have to get a union ID? Do you get sanctioned in any way before you can become a carny?
No, you can. I did at the end of the year. I went to the International Independent Association. Amusement Association, and I became an official carny. But no, it's a minimum wage to below minimum wage job, and if you show up, I was able to get on to 10 carnivals with almost no references and no abilities. But a carnival worker who does it many years can make more money, especially on a specialized ride.
All right, so you traveled all across the country and met, I'm sure, some very interesting people. What about the conditions? I mean, do the carnies, do they get put up at night? Are there trailers? Are you on your own? Well, what about conditions for just your survival?
Well, in the old days, the people used to sleep under rides, and sometimes they still do. But mostly, if you're traveling with a carnival, you're set up in a trailer. And it's a very small little compartment with just a tiny bed. And but in some trailers you can bunk with other people. Up in Alaska, I had 4 native Alaskans that bunked with me in the same room, and we were in a trailer that moved from Anchorage to Fairbanks, and so you get to know your fellow bunkmates pretty well.
Why you did it because you were thinking about writing a book? You're a journalist. You have a thirst for knowledge. Why do these carnies, as we call them, why do they do it? What's their story typically?
I never quite figured that out because the pay is so poor. Sometimes for the hours is below minimum wage, but it's a lifestyle. It becomes addicting. Some people, as a carnival worker, wouldn't want to do anything else. They consider everything else a sucker job. In fact, when you leave a carnival, they often will look at you and say, "I'm sorry you have to do this. You're going back to a sucker job." And, that's the way they look. A carnival worker will look at you and me as suckers and as marks. They're smarter than us, especially if they're playing a game. If they're running a game, you're the mark. They're deciding if you win or lose. And it's show business. And it gets addicting.
What kind of jobs did you perform? I mean, were you running rides, and did you have any training?
Right. As I did, I went on both sides of the major sides of the carnival, and one is running rides, and that would be called a ride jockey. And I ran a Ferris wheel up in Alaska, and I ran carnivals, and I ran carousels in Chicago and in San Francisco and California. So those are ride jockeys, and I was also a jointee. Carnivals have their own slangs. I was a jointee, which is a game, the person who runs games, and I did that during fair season last year in Minnesota and Oklahoma City and Texas. And so I like to say that I was slinging iron, which is setting up rides and tearing them down. So I was slinging iron and pushing plush all year. And pushing plush means selling games and gifts. So slinging iron and pushing plush all year, I could make your day or crush your heart.
Should I be concerned that you weren't really properly trained to run those rides?
Well, I was trained, and when I got there, and you learned on the job, and the safety inspectors come to every site. So I was very impressed by the safety of my rides. They were always checked, and I was eventually fully trained. So, yes.
Our guest here, Michael Sean Comerford, who spent a year as a carny traveling from town to town across the U.S. to get this experience. And part of your story is you hitchhiked, and we've talked on our radio program, boy, nobody picks up hitchhikers anymore. It used to be the way everyone got around. Your experience was that people did pick you up.
It's amazing. I don't know if I was the number one hitchhiker in America or not, but I hitchhiked about 20,000 miles through 36 states, and I was picked up by inventors and lawyers and truckers and families and grandmas and grandpas and rich people and poor people and Hispanics and whites and blacks and lepidopterists, which is a butterfly expert from Princeton, a magician, authors, preachers, bloggers, criminals.
Were you ever nervous that they wanted to pick up a hitchhiker? Were you ever in a situation where you thought maybe this isn't my day?
You know, I was nervous several times, and when I was a hitchhiker when I was much younger. I'm now 55, and that's another, an odd part of this whole story is I did it as an older man. But when I was a young man, I hitchhiked, and I took a knife with me just in case it was, it was the 70s, and I thought, well, you know what, Dahmer's eating people. This could be really very dangerous. And this time I didn't bring a knife with me, but I was worried several times, but never rightly. Everybody was kind-hearted. Everyone was a good Samaritan, and they were extremely compelling, interesting people. We have a great country we're living in, Martin.
It's a great experience because I always say, I don't want to pick up the hitchhiker, but I also wonder about the people that do pick them up. Are they suspect? But it sounds like you had a great experience, including the lepidopterist. What was that again? The butterfly expert?
A lepidopterist is a butterfly expert. He was studying climate change on the physiology and genealogy of butterflies.
So you covered 36 states, and I'm sure, you're 50...
And Mexico.
36...
I went down to Mexico because, the new face of Carnivals are Mexicans. And because the pay is so low that they're relying on Mexican carnival workers. And so I went down to Mexico, and there's a little town in Mexico that empties out of men every year. It's called Tlapacoya. It's in Veracruz State. And these men go up and work American carnivals for 9 months, and then they come back and live for 3 months, winter, down in Veracruz, and come back. So I'm sorry for interrupting you.
No, you're fine.
I wanted to get the Mexican.
Well, no, and you had mentioned throughout low pay, I should point out, you wrote about $225 a week to $325. That was sort of the range?
Right, for a ride jockey.
That's unbelievable. And so you're going to live off of that by hitchhiking, not having a way of transportation. But I wanted to ask you, state to state, any state that you found to be more beautiful than the other?
Well, Alaska is unparalleled. I mean, nobody can beat Alaska. And but I worked in California, New York, New Jersey, Chicago, Alaska, Minnesota, Oklahoma, Texas, Georgia, and Florida. And in Florida, I worked in a freak show. But the most beautiful state is Alaska. Seeing Mount McKinley, going through Denali National Park, that is really a spectacular state.
You worked with some freaks along the way, including the 22-inch half man.
Yes, Shorty Dangerously, who's just in Chicago this weekend for a show, and the freaks were amazing. They were so friendly, and they have a real camaraderie, and it was a real insight into that world. And there are still freak shows that's a remnant of the old-time carnivals.
Is the bearded lady still out there?
They have bearded ladies out there, yes.
Now, is there a book coming out, Michael?
There is a book I wrote all year on Huffington Post and on my own blog called Eyes Like Carnivals, and I'm trying to sell a book along the same lines of Eyes Like Carnivals, www.eyeslikecarnivals.com, and should be coming out next year if I am able to find an agent, maybe one there in St. Louis.
You never know who's listening. EyesLikeCarnivals.com, that website. Michael Sean Comerford, a fellow Marquette alum, class of 81. And one final thought. Do the carnies mind being called carnies, or sort of the stereotype they've been labeled with?
Some do and some don't. Some wear a hat saying "proud to be carny," and some say, I'm an entertainer. But I would be proud to be called a carny. I mean, they work very hard. They're the salt of the earth, and there's great pathos and dramas to be played out behind the scenes in carnivals, and that's what I went out to see, and I found it.
Michael, thanks so much for sharing your story.